Hey, everybody, I've got a real treat for you today. We just finished a Great Boss workshop, and I've got 4 EOS implementers that are going to talk about their bad boss moments. Get ready for a great conversation. Hi, everyone. I'm Beth Fahey. Welcome to Bad Boss Confessional. Today's episode is going to be a little bit different than we normally do. Today, we actually have a panel, and it's a group of implementers, and we just came off of a Great Boss workshop. So it's all very fresh in our mind, the 5 leadership practices, the 5 management practices. And we learned a lot from the people that were in the workshop with us, and we want to share some of that wisdom with you today. Do you love running on EOS? Try Strutty, the EOS platform people love. Native integrations and extra features help you manage people, projects, process, and engagement. Connected to your favorite EOS tools and all in one place. You love EOS. It's time to love the platform you're running it on. Try Strutty free at strutty.com. That's STRETY.com. Strutty, the EOS platform people love. Let's be honest, hiring the right people is hard. That's why I love Titus Talent Strategies. Their whole person hiring approach helps you find and keep A players who align with your values, and they back it with an industry-leading guarantee. Best part? Titus Talent Strategies is included in the entrepreneurial toolkit for companies running on EOS. Check them out at titustalent.com/EOS. So without any further ado, I would like to introduce the EOS implementers that are here with me. Mary Reilly-Magee, some of you may remember, she was on my podcast a few weeks ago. Mary, say hello and give us a quick introduction of who you are and where you come from, and just kind of a brief little bit of your history as a boss, if you wouldn't mind.
So, expert implementer, US implementer. I'm from San Antonio by way of Glen Ellen, Illinois. And I, prior to being an EOS implementer, I was a 10th grade English teacher, and then I built a learn to swim business from scratch over 20 years. So I've had lots and lots of opportunities to mess it up. And
Awesome. Thanks, Mary. I know you'll have great stories to share with us today. Next, we've got Jordan Regas. Jordan, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Hi, yeah. So I'm based out of Oklahoma City, Oklahoma. Been a boss for over a decade now, I guess about 12 years. And when I first became a boss, I really didn't know anything really didn't know what I was doing. Hadn't really had much training. I'm not sure if I had any training. So I definitely learned the hard way, made a lot of mistakes. I started a business about 2014, and it's interesting. I realized that I quit my job only to realize that I got about 5 or 6 jobs that I was doing all at the same time, and after spending some time growing that business, acquired another business in 2018, and really didn't start to get a grasp on what it means to be a great boss until we started implementing EOS. So kind of excited just to share some of the learning lessons along the way here.
Awesome. Great. Thanks, Jordan. Next, we've got Phil Ouellette. Phil.
So Phil Ouellette, U.S. implementer, certified implementer, based here in Madison, Wisconsin. Been an implementer for about 3 years. Have been a boss in one form or another for 45-ish years, I'd say, probably 10 to 12 different companies. So plenty of opportunities to learn how to be better. But even going through today's session, realize how much more I could still improve. And so it's a journey we never end. And happy to share what some of those lessons we learned today.
Awesome. Thank you. And then last but not least is Barb Reimbold.
Hello, everyone. So Barb Reimbold, Grand Rapids, Michigan. I've been a boss. Why they let me be a boss as early as I was like in my early 20s, and they're like, here's a team. And I thought, oh my gosh, okay, here we go. But I've had the opportunity to be a boss both informally and formally, like project teams. Sometimes officially people reported to me, sometimes they didn't. And they're like, just go make those people do things. So been doing that for over 25 years. Yeah, so excited to be here, excited to see what others have to say in their confessionals as we talk about things.
So we're going to have a lot of confessions today ourselves, right? As EOS implementers, we've bled the blood, as we say, and we certainly have that background. And it helps us teach the stuff when we have our own stories to tell, wouldn't you think? It's very helpful to provide the context for people as we're teaching these tools. Like somebody said earlier, like so few of us have had any formal professional development, leadership or management training. And that is not uncommon. I thought it was like a rare thing, but actually, I think it's probably like 90% of the people that I have on Great Boss workshops. This is the first training that they've ever had. And so it's kind of nice to do that work and to help them get to the next place. And so, anyway, thanks for sharing yourselves with our audience today. And let's just get into it, shall we? All right. Let's start with some of the things that we learned during the workshop today. We had a lot of people, varying degrees of management. Some people had been managing people for over 20 years. Other people were actually brand new on the job. For those that were brand new and new to leading and managing, what do you think the biggest obstacle is in getting better?
Yeah, Beth, I would say, at least with a few of the folks we talked to, certainly in my group, they were becoming new bosses in situations that were not good situations. The culture was bad. They had been burned by previous bosses. And these people, to their credit, recognized that and also recognized that this was going to be a slow process of rebuilding trust, and it was going to take time. And I think brought the right perspective that they weren't going to change this overnight, but also recognized they had a big hill to climb.
I mean, looking back at your early days when you led and managed teams, or maybe it was just a person, what did you get wrong in the early days when you were managing folks? Barb.
I have a great story from this one. One of my very first opportunities to lead a team, I was probably one of those taskmaster bosses, right? I was like, let's get stuff done. And I had an employee that was not holding up her end of the bargain. She wasn't getting stuff done. And I thought, two birds, one stone. I am going to tell her off in front of my boss, because then my boss knows it's not my fault that she's not doing her stuff. I am very passionate about praise in public and criticize in private now, but oh my gosh, I'm outside my boss's office and I'm telling off my employee about how horrible she is and she should have been done and why didn't she do all these things. And I get done with that and I'm pretty proud of myself, and my boss goes, "Hey Barb, can you come here for a minute?" And so she pulls me into her office to very quietly tell me what I did not do right. And she's like, "Would you have appreciated me doing this in front of my boss?" And I was like, "Oh, no, of course not." She's like, "You cannot do that, right? You can't criticize out there. You're never gonna get the respect of your team, right?" And so it was a real life lesson immediately. So,
And did it take you a while to get that person's trust back after that happened?
absolutely, yeah. No, it took a really long time. I would say probably 2 years, honestly, before it was like the rest of my team.
Yeah, stuff like that is so destructive, right?
Yeah.
Who else has a good story like that from your early days of managing?
Yeah, I have one that was just kind of, as I was thinking about some stories, there's one that I tend to talk about a lot with people that I had a. This was early on though. I think we only had maybe a handful of people in the company, and we were growing, and I was needing to kind of step out of some seats, and I wasn't very good at setting clear expectations. We talked about that today in the Great Boss Workshop about how so many teams just don't quite understand exactly what their role is, what it means. We give people titles, and that's what I think the accountability chart, if you're familiar with the accountability chart in EOS, it does such a good job of just creating clarity, and titles are so vague that I had one person that one employee, and I had given her a title, but the company was growing, and I wanted to step out of some seats and hire someone to fill some other roles. And I thought it would be a great idea to hire someone with the same title. That even though it was for a different role, it was the same title. And she actually found out through a Instagram post, social media, that someone else had been hired for this role that for the same title but different role. So long story short, I think just getting really clear on roles and titles and what this seat does and what that seat does. Had I had the accountability chart, it would have prevented a kind of a disaster, and I lost a good person in the process there.
All right. Mary, do you have anything from your early days?
Like sifting through them all. Um, yeah, and I'm trying to figure out where to land because my earliest leadership and management opportunities were either as a lifeguard, a head guard, or a program director of a learn to swim at a big natatorium. But also, I came up through movie theaters. Both of these jobs I worked through college, and so I think I'm going to go through the movie theater. But and what's on that one, I feel like in my reflection, I'm remembering the bosses I had and how it helped me be the boss I wanted to have. You know, like as at the movie theater, I was a concessionist, and we had supervisors. And at the end of the night, we had to clean behind the counter, like clean the popcorn machine, clean the hot dog rollers, and it's disgusting to say, but we cleaned the hot dog roller with Windex. Thank you very much. Okay. Isn't that disgusting? And but I had this one supervisor who's just this big, like burly guy who, only said one syllable words, and he would, like find the most minuscule thing, somewhere on that hot dog thing, cooker or in the popcorn, and he'd make us re-clean it and re-clean it and re-clean it. And so when I became a supervisor, I wanted to like have be a buddy in a way, and that got confusing. And I will say, moving from buddy to boss, but that was my strategy. As I wasn't going to be that guy. I was going to kind of work with my people and try and be a buddy in the work. But so same thing in the pool, who helped and who got in their ego and took the title, but didn't do any of the work anymore. So those are my thoughts.
So, Mary, I'm dying laughing here because all I can think of is Gus from Breaking Bad. Have you seen Breaking Bad?
I've seen most of it, but I can't remember. Yeah.
He was the guy that ran the chicken restaurant, and so he was very OCD about cleaning the equipment. Anyway, I just flashed on him in his yellow shirt cleaning the equipment, and I'm thinking, God, when I watched Breaking Bad, I thought, ugh, I could have never worked for that guy. And there you are, you had that experience. So, all right, Phil, anything that you'd like to share from your early days as a boss?
Yeah, I mean, thinking about it, I think my first real significant job I had was as a controller reporting to the CFO at a military electronics supplier. So we worked on what we call black projects, and billing is kind of weird in government sort of industries. Anyways, it's as we grew and I was building a team out, I had somebody who we would call a wrong person in the right seat. I think the term used today was a productive jerk. But she was like the only one. This is in the early days. This is back in the mid '80s. Those like computers, laptops were all new. People were building out data sets. Incredibly talented, but she was so um, she was so rough with other people that it was tough for me as a young manager who really had no training to give productive feedback. And so I was one of those. I avoided confrontation, was kind of working around and skirting and not addressing what the real issues were in a productive way, and ultimately came to the point where I had to terminate her. And mistake is I should have recognized to walk her out the door, because I left her for a half hour. When I came back, she was gone, and she had totally kind of blown up the data sets. So when like I turned her computer on, it was basically a big, I won't say it, but an FU kind of printed out in sort of pixelated form on this laptop. So she left in a bad way. We lost a lot of data. I didn't handle it well. And it's a lesson that's kind of stayed with me ever since, which is don't let those things linger too long.
All right, so we had young managers on today, and it's hard to watch them go through that process, but you got to go through it, right, to get to the other side. And so having these tools, having the leadership practices, having the management practices, I'm just curious if, without naming names, of course, did you see any epiphanies or lights go on for people when they had something that they could sort of cling to as far as those leadership and management practices today? And if you could just, like, if you had a for instance that would help ground us in what they learned today. So just thinking about.
Yeah, I do. I mean, I think that the big aha for a lot of these people was that there's even a difference between leadership and management. I know that was true for me, but, not that long ago, did I not really understand the difference between leadership and management. And it's really fun to see the light bulbs go off and see them see these two really important roles so differently. I mean, that there is this distinction and that they do have this very simplified, it's just really so much simpler if they just follow these 5 practices, and that it is a practice. I think that's also like a bit of an epiphany for these youngsters, I guess. What I say.
So say more about that difference between leadership and management, because I don't think we've actually ever talked about that on this podcast before.
Leadership to me is very much like, here's where we're going, right? Like this. And management is more, here's how we get there, right? This is the work to get it done. So vision versus execution, right? Working on the business versus in the business, planning, thinking at a high level about the business, as opposed to making sure what needs to happen in the day to day is happening. So we're moving toward executing on our vision.
And I think what happens too, and I'll let the rest of you, weigh in here as well, is that people think that you pick one or the other. Oh, I'm more of a leader, or I'm more of a manager. And the thing is like you kind of have to be both. And you can't be selective, like, well, I only like the big picture stuff. I only like to take people through that. It's sort of like right people, right seats. You have to have both, don't you think?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. All right. So who else had something that they saw where a light bulb went on for one of the members of our group today?
Well, I think for a few of them, it really came down to being intentional and being prepared when they go and meet and talk with their people. A number of people seem to pick that up. I think both Mary, you seem to hear that from your group as well. And that actually preparing and being intentional going into it will actually save them more time, so they don't have to meet with them as long or as frequently, because we did talk about, can you eliminate some of the meetings that you have in your schedule to save more time? I think it was just that concept, the clarity break, make time to save time. And That seemed to be a thing that a lot of them focused on today.
Great. Good stuff. Barb, anything you saw today?
Yeah, I think quarterly conversations were a big topic. Not being in a group, so I didn't, John and I got to have some good conversations today, right? But as I reflected on what I was hearing from the group, it was with these quarterly conversations and talking to their team members of being the boss, not the buddy, but preparing for all that. So not just going in, flying by the seat of their pants, but putting some time and effort, them being ready, their people they're accountable for being ready for it.
Yeah. And I think that's such a interesting concept, right? Is stepping back and saying, am I being a boss here or am I trying to be everybody's friend? And I know that that is such a hard thing. And even for leaders, I mean, I've got teams where there's been somebody who founded a company and the nicest guy in the world who can't have the tough conversations with their team. And, they're very much motivated by being liked and not that motivated about having real open and honest conversations. And that can be, just the death knell for a company, right? Because then when that's our culture, that we don't talk about the ugly stuff, we don't talk about things in an open and honest way, that trickle down just happens all the way throughout the organizations. So just kind of taking a step back and just like without again naming names of your teams, how many of you have worked with those types of teams, like a nice team?
Yeah, 100%. Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. And what do you think, besides what I just mentioned? I mean, what do you think the other ramifications of working in a nice culture are?
Mhm. So I have a example of one. It's the owner that's just so nice, and he's been wanting to be the manager of a department. We've been together for about 4 or 5 years, and so he's been wanting to be the manager, and he finally is admitting of I'm not good at the LMA part, right? Like I know I own this and I want to manage these people, but I actually don't want to manage these people. And so this quarter they have finally hired someone to manage the department, so he gets to be the owner and he gets to do the work, but now someone else is managing the department. What happened before that, though, is turnover. They were turning over people because they weren't keeping the good people around, right? He wasn't having the tough conversations with these employees that weren't doing well. So the bad employees were staying and the good employees were leaving. The good employees were like, this is not a company I want to work for. And so the turnover was huge. And it's only been a quarter or two of having a new boss in there that's actually having the tough conversations, and the quality of employees they were able to hire and the people that are staying, it is a night and day difference that they're already seeing financial impacts because of just getting a good boss in there, even though the owner gets to stay and he still gets to be the nice guy, right?
Yeah, and that's I think the distinction between a nice company and a company where you're open and honest. So
Hmm.
when you're a nice company, you're sweeping things under the rug, you're not really talking about it. But when you're open and honest, Brene Brown has a great saying. She says, "Be clear to be kind," right? And so if we come at it from a place of actually, I need to be kind to this person, and kind means telling them the truth that I think they're struggling with the GWC for this role. And like, let's get them to a place where they can actually really function well, right? As opposed to pretending that it's not happening, or that if we double down on training, maybe they'll get to that place, right?
Right. Yep. That's it.
Yeah. What other examples, do you guys have of those types of cultures?
Yeah, something that comes to mind right now is this concept. I believe it was an author, Leanne Davey, that I got this from, who calls it conflict debt. How, like, in those nice cultures where we're not able to address the issues and have those tough conversations, it's not like the problem goes away. it sits there. It's like debt. That's just like your student loan that you might be ignoring, or some, you know, I I have young daughters, and they'll one time I went to go clean out my car, and I found an old sandwich, half of a sandwich sitting on in the back of the car, and just avoiding looking back there and cleaning that out wasn't going to help. The sandwich was just going to sit there and mold and make the car stink. It's like the debt that you just leave alone. And the same thing with conflict too, and addressing those issues. There was an issue that comes to mind with one of my teams where these two leaders just weren't having a conversation about something they needed to have a conversation about. And it wasn't getting better with time. It was getting worse with time. And the relationship was starting to strain, and it was starting to affect the team. And eventually, once they did have the conversation and they just addressed it, it was it was just like a miracle. It's just like, "All right, wow, everything's starting to work again, and we're starting to communicate, and we're starting to talk, and, and things started to get better." So avoiding the tough situations, it doesn't make things any better. It only makes things worse with time.
So, one of the things that came up today at the very end was there was a gentleman who was on our call who was asking about the ratio of positive feedback to negative feedback. I know that this is a challenging area for a lot of my leaders, right? Because they tend to think like, well, I can't, just praise people all the time. So here's what the ratio is. People need to hear 6 positive pieces of feedback to 1 negative piece of feedback. And you can look this up, right? You can Google it. There is a ratio. In fact, I've seen the ratio actually even be higher. People need to hear that positive feedback a lot more to balance that negative feedback. And the reason is because people tend to focus on the negative feedback because that's how we're wired. We're wired for to protect ourselves. We're wired for scarcity. And so when we hear negative information, we hyper focus on it, and we don't really focus on the positive stuff as much because we're kind of in survival mode when we hear that stuff. And so I'm just curious if you see that also on your teams, that this is a real challenging area for people to provide that positive feedback. And I'm wondering if what you see with your teams, if you see that any of your teams have cracked the code on how to do this in a really positive way.
Well, I don't know if anybody's cracked the code, because this is really hard to do. And while you were talking, this statistics, this ratio is really, really interesting. And of course, I apply it to my family as well. And how many criticisms am I giving, and how many positives? And it ain't 6 to 1 on some days, I can tell you that. But it made me think of,
Like 12 to 1, Mary? Is it a lot? Like so much grace for families?
I wish that were the case, that I
Oh,
was achieving. But I like, if there is something that was really kind of a sting for me today, I'd say that's the one. And also, I come across it all the time, and I came across it in my own business. The age group that I was hiring in my business were primarily 18 to 24. And I was really sitting here thinking about what was my fatal flaw as a boss, growing up as a boss. And I think one of the things was kind of being manipulative, and not, and really thinking about how I could get people to do what I wanted them to do, as opposed to taking care of the human, and what I came to understand in a very acutely painful way is, in order to retain these people, I needed to water the green spots. And so that's kind of that set us off as a leadership team on the path of, how can we systemize that? How can we water the green spots consistently? And there's 1,000 ways you can do it. I mean, everybody's had the, like, rubber bands on your wrist, and you move them over as you give. We used to do lifesavers. It was to learn to swim school. So you got a lifesaver every time, we were giving positive feedback. Or I've heard pennies or rocks moved from one pocket to the other. But man, it's a toughie because we are wired to see what's wrong, and it's a completely different lens to just focus on what's going right and positively reinforce the right stuff.
I had a team that was trying to change the behavior. I don't know if they've cracked the code on it, but they're trying to change the behavior. So they actually put it on their scorecard. Did each of the leadership team members provide a core value shout out of somehow, right? They intentionally were asking, did everyone on the leadership team say something nice to somebody not on the leadership team that week? And so they were trying to change the behavior. So that was one way that they were trying to force it. It took them a bit. It took them a quarter to be able to say yeses all around, right? They're like, it's uncomfortable. It's weird. What do you mean? I just go say something nice to somebody. Maybe a little bit to what the gentleman was saying at the end of our not bad boss, a great boss workshop today, right? Where he goes, if you say too many nice things to them, is that just me being a nice boss, right? So the 6-to-1 ratio is helpful to hear.
Yeah. I mean, one way that we did it at the bakery that I had, just to have a culture of more positive feedback, and I do share this with all my teams because it's not EOS, okay? So don't send me to EOS jail on this. But what we did is we augmented the level 10 agenda just a bit. And I suppose you could put this in the customer employee headlines section now, but this actually fell to the more at the end when we were recording the ratings. So just before we would do ratings, we would say, all right, who has appreciations? Now, this is something that we unabashedly stole from Zing Train or Zingerman. So for those of you from Ann Arbor that are familiar with them as a training company, they had this practice of appreciations. And so what appreciations are is that you look at a person, say you're in your level 10. I look at my sister Becky across the way and I say, hey, I just want to give an appreciation for you going the extra mile. Going the extra mile was one of our core values. And you set me up for success on that delivery. You had everything ready, the contract, the icing bag, all that. And it made it super easy for me to come in on a Sunday and make that delivery. Thank you very much. And so we would do that at every level 10, and that's how we would finish it. And just a little hack here, we would do it just before the ratings. And then interestingly, the ratings went up as a result, and everybody felt good leaving. And now I wasn't doing that to game the ratings necessarily, but it had everybody leaving the level 10 feeling pretty good about each other. And it really bonded the team when you did kind of share that positive feedback. So I also taskmaster sort of a boss, and I was really bad at calling things out that I'd see. I would walk through the bakery and I'd say things like, that name's spelled wrong. That's the wrong color on that cake. You need to match it to this ribbon swatch. Oh, over here, I something's wrong with this icing. I don't know what it is, but somebody's got to fix that. Okay, see you later. Bye. And then I would leave and go to my desk and sit down and go do my real work. Meanwhile, like everybody in the back is like, what the hell just happened? And that wasn't very nice. And I'm thinking I just did them a service because I just saved them from a customer complaint down the road. But what I ended up doing was completely demoralizing the team. And I don't think we realize just how important that is for people to get that positive feedback, right? So, anyway, what about you, Phil? Anything here for you on positive or negative feedback that came to mind while we were talking about it?
I think what you said was just it kind of aligned with what I heard from my group, right? Just talking about the importance of giving feedback. So, for example, there are a few teams that are dealing with some really difficult cultures, right? Situations they walk into weren't good. And then somebody who's new to a company as well as his position, and kind of just recognizing how this system, the way we talk about LMA and sort of the systemized process you go through on how to have communication with your employees, I think it was just dawning on him that, we as humans just have this kind of insatiable craving for positive feedback, right? And, just as we're thinking of the conversation, the 6-to-1 ratio, it's just reminded me of the thing we've heard from maybe self-help people, right? And coaches out there who say, you are who you're surrounded by. And it takes 5 people or more to offset one negative person in your life, right? So it's kind of the same idea, right? Which is that negative can just overpower a lot. You need a lot of positive to really overcome the influence that negative person or feedback could have.
Yeah, great stuff. All right. Any last words on feedback, positive or negative?
Yeah, the last thing I'll just add, I'm not sure if you've mentioned on the podcast before, but you mentioned it in the workshop today, is don't do the crap sandwich there where you're gonna do a bit of positive and then a negative and another positive. Let your positive be positive, and then let your constructive feedback be constructive, and do it at separate times.
Yeah. Because, yeah, otherwise people leave that meeting thinking, I think I'm doing okay. Right? I think that's what I heard. Okay, I'm good. And then they move on. So no poop sandwiches, people. That HR practice is dead. Like, stop doing it.
Let's kill it for good, please.
Let's kill it for good.
Yeah.
Well, I just want to thank everybody so much for helping out today on the Great Boss Workshop and also just being on this podcast. I think it's super helpful for folks to hear from other leaders. And here we got 4 other leaders who can share their experiences all in a half an hour episode. So hopefully y'all got some good nuggets out of that. And just know that Great Boss Workshops are a great place to go to learn more, like a level 200 class on LMA. So for those of you that are EOS, LMA stands for Leadership Management and Accountability, and it's a lifelong journey. So thank you for helping with that and helping people on their way, on their journey today, and for helping our listeners get a little bit better at it too. I really appreciate you. So have a great weekend. Thank you so much. And we'll see you around soon.
Thank you, Beth. Thank you for helping us on our journey. Appreciate you.
Thanks, Beth. Great workshop today.
Thanks so much to Mary Reilly-Magee, Barb Reimbold, Jordan Regas, and Ouellette, who shared a little bit about themselves, their own bad boss moments, and what they learned today in our Great Boss Workshop. If you liked what you heard, please like, subscribe, and share with friends who need to hear this. Thanks for listening to Bad Boss Confessional. We'll see you next week.